Well, good afternoon, Tiger Club members. Welcome to our Zoom meeting for Tuesday, October 13th. We're really pleased today to have Soren Petro of 810 WHB as our guest speaker. Of course, he hosts the Drive Time show from 2 to 6, veteran of more than 2 decades, sports talk in Kansas City. In my humble opinion, he is truly one of the best around. Soren, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. It's amazing we found a way for Zwillenberg to not get me lunch yet another time.
Well, you know, we don't have access to the hamburgers, but there are some advantages. I'm actually in Chicago today talking to you,
Very good.
family. And for one of the few times on these Zoom calls, I am wearing pants today. So,
well, truth be told, I am not. So there you go.
So
I am wearing shorts just to set the record straight, but I am not wearing pants.
All right. Hey, Soren, thanks for joining us. I didn't think when we booked you that we would be talking about a Mizzou win and a Chiefs loss. It was quite a weekend.
Yeah, it was. And what a great win for the Missouri Tigers and Eli Drinkwitz. And I'm very happy to see him get that win. I've been really impressed. I don't know, what Tiger fans' initial reaction was, and I'm sure they dug in immediately to the background of Eli Drinkwitz and found a lot to like in his background. I really was kind of waiting to hear. First of all, you hear the name, right? That doesn't sound like Bill Parcells, right? The football kind of name, like Eli Drinkwitz sounds like a lit professor, right? It's not. It just doesn't sound like Bill Cowher, the different kind of football names, and you're just like, okay, let me take a look. And you look at his background, you're like, okay, I like what I see there. More information comes out that Arkansas was allegedly really hot after him, and they should be. He's a native son from down there. And that Missouri went out, and you see the contract, you're like, wow, they must have been, winning a big fight for this guy. And then when I got a chance to sit and just ask a couple of questions on these Zoom calls, it was the first time I got a chance to talk to him and watch him interact with the media. He's very impressive. And so, I feel good. I've taken Mizzou all 3 times in our program picks. I'm 2-1, taking them against the points. And I loved them against LSU. I got some friends in Vegas that are in different contests and everything. And that was my game. I said, take Mizzou against LSU. And I'm very happy for Eli Drinkwitz and his staff, which I've been impressed with the guys that I've seen on the Zoom calls as well, that, you can do a lot of things right. And I think they are, and they're moving the program in the right direction. There's really good recruiting signs. But you need wins, right? The wins need to be there to validate what you're doing. So that was great to see for the Missouri Tigers. And on the Chiefs side, right, losses happen. We were discussing this before we got started. My open yesterday was calm down, people. I mean, it's been 11 months, 13 games since the Chiefs lost a game, and they lost by 8 points. Yes, it's the biggest loss in the Patrick Mahomes era, and it's still just one score. And even we were meeting before this, me and Curtis and Jed, and we were going over topics and everything was offense. I said, at what point do we say, hey, everyone's talking about the problems with the offense. They did score 32 points. It was 40 to 32. 32 should be enough to win. So, and I think that's another reason. Yeah, maybe that's another problem that the Chiefs need to solve. Clearly, the defense got exposed a little bit. But, yeah, I think a good day, not a great day, right? But I think that it's okay that the Chiefs lost a game. It was going to happen at some point, and a great win for Mizzou. So if you're a Mizzou Chiefs fan, you're still doing just fine.
I know you've been a big proponent of Eli since we hired him, and he's done a lot of great stuff off the field too. I think taking all the kids down to vote earlier this year. He came and visited our club in February before the pandemic introduction, and I don't know if you know this, he bought beers for everybody at the flea market. There were about 200 people, so he's doing the right things, and he really seems making his mark in the recruiting trail so far too.
Let me do so. 200 beers at Zwillenberg's prices. Let me think where that is. I think he can afford it. I think he's got it, right? And listen, not to focus. It's not about. I hope everybody here makes millions of dollars. That's on with us. I mean, but I think that contract to me was the first thing that opened my eyes to, like, Missouri went for it, right? And they didn't necessarily go to win the press release, but they're going to win the press conference. We saw that just by how good he is. And, the contract states that there was competition to get this guy, and for good reason. And, I think today's NFL, Chris Kleiman just got a contract extension at K-State. And I said, is it too early to give a guy a contract? Of course it is. Yeah, it's way too early to be giving a guy a big pay raise like that. But that's the cost of doing business in college football. That's how it has to work. And so K-State did what they needed to do to make sure they kept their guy in the mix. Mizzou did what they needed to do to go get one of the best prospects out there. Think of it as going into Latin America. And you got one guy who looks like, he might make the bigs one day. And then you got another guy who looks like he's going to be a star. And you give a 15-year-old kid or just turned 16-year-old kid $4 or $5 million because he's got the pedigree. And that's what Eli Drinkwitz was a guy who had the pedigree. Then you bring him in and you could see why he would win any interview, right? Any interview process. I don't know how, you could throw this guy for a loop. I've hit him with some questions, from a standpoint of, I think early on it was pandemic questions and being transparent about different things, and come back a couple of weeks later, he's having another Zoom and I hit him with another one. He goes, you're the guy that you're going to ask these, the digging questions, huh? I said, okay. And then he answered them. And I think that's what's fantastic. I mean, I'll be honest with you. He doesn't have the resume of Andy Reid, but he handles the press conference better than Andy Reid, right? Already at this point. That's not to say he's, a better coach, be clear, but he is amazing with people. And I've been really impressed. That's a guy that shows total confidence. He knows what he's doing. He knows where he's going, and nothing rattles him. Now, I know he got after the media a little bit. He didn't like some of the questions after the first game about, getting receivers involved and all of that kind of thing. And I almost feel like that was a little bit of sending a message that I'm here for my guys. And that was a message to his players through the media that I got your back and we're all in this together, which is, I think it was definitely a calculated move. If I'm wrong on the reason, I don't think I'm wrong in what he was trying to do, which was send a message to his players as much as it was chastise anybody in the media. But I think he is a guy that seems to be in complete control, has total confidence in what he's doing. And, I think he's a guy that, you're going to be talking about a contract extension probably pretty quick, just like K-State had to do with Chris Kleiman. And I think he's one of those guys that, he looks the type that rocket through college to the pros. And I know that's not what Tiger fans want to hear, but he's about the most impressive coaching hire I've seen since at least Bill Self, as far as somebody who can stand there and you listen to everything he says and nothing seems to faze him. And he seems to have an answer for everything. He's been the most impressive hire locally in the Kansas City area since Bill Self.
Let's talk about the game against LSU a little bit. Tigers were -3 in turnovers, had a botched fake punt or an unsuccessful fake punt, and still overcame. And I know, being a lifelong Missouri fan, when LSU got down to the 1 yard line on a questionable catch, here we go again. We're going to lose in the last second. And the goal line stand reminded me of the '69 Chiefs against the Jets, in
right.
the playoffs. It was an awesome feeling to win that game. It was
great. And I think that, we talked about, I've talked about Justin Herbert. Can he win, right? Last night, if anybody watched Monday Night Football, great performance. We're going to talk a lot about his stats. He's putting up great numbers. He's 0-4 as a starter, right? That goes to head coaches as well. The Chargers are a team that I called yesterday just good enough to lose. Mm-hmm. And that's what you don't want to be, a team that can hang around and stay there, but can't make the big play or the game-winning play. And Missouri proved that they could really several times in that game with offensive plays and defensive plays. And I think that's a great tribute to the game management skills of the head coach. I mean, you got to have talent, you got to have schemes, but you also got to maximize it all by understanding how to manage the game. When is the time to go for it on fourth down? Is this a key play? Is this the time that you go for the big play? And I think that's what we saw, is that in a tight game, he could manage the game. And I think that's one of the real questions for Ed Orgeron at LSU. Ed Orgeron strikes me, I said his career, he may be lucky to get this, but strikes me as more Mac Brown than Nick Saban, more of a talent accumulator than an orchestra creator, right? I got that line from Billy Donlin from UMKC. He said, are we accumulating talent or are we building an orchestra? There's two ways to do it. Just get as much talent as you can out on the field and just get the ball out there and hopefully just the physical abilities, and you win the one-on-one matchups and you win games. I think that was a lot of Mac Brown, right? I think that's kind of how Ed Orgeron is. I think Nick Saban gets all the great talent, but he also builds an orchestra and he has all the pieces to it. And this was all the pieces coming together. And let's be clear, a lot of the pieces were out, right? Battling COVID right now. This win against an LSU team that, yes, lost a lot of talent, but has also been recruiting high-level talent. They may be young, but they're super talented, and there's no excuse for them. They just got beat. And I think to see the quarterback play at the level he did, and I think Missouri fans can remember Gary Pinkel saying, he said to me at a radio show, like his first year, I asked him about finding Brad Smith and bringing Brad Smith really from his old job as a recruit. And he said, we will have a quarterback at Missouri every year I'm here. And that was one of the greatest called shots that I've ever heard somebody do. I've seen some other good ones. I thought Steve Spagnuolo had a great one last year when he said, don't judge us in the first half defensively, judge us in the second half. But nothing better than Gary Pinkel saying, we will have a quarterback every year. And that's something we've seen some of the other local programs and programs around the country. They may be able to get good linebackers, good defensive ends, all these different positions. But if you can't make it work at the quarterback position, you're never going to have great success. And to see him, turning Bazelak into a guy that can really play when it's not a guy that he handpicked, all those aspects that you're watching in that LSU game, I think are just such positive signs for the future. And I really think he showed signs even in the Alabama game. I know gamblers will call it a backdoor cover, some by the way scores, but the way that they continue to fight, he continued to be invested and clearly was motivated to get another score on the board. I think you see the tenacity, the competitive nature that he has, and he's a guy that Will Harris, who we have on a regular basis, who's ESPN college football handicapper, called him aggressive to the point of being reckless when it comes to his play calling. And, we went through what the reckless part was. He said, well, he'll go for some fourth downs that you shouldn't, to which I think Will Harris might be more old school, because the analytics guys will say there's a lot of fourth downs you should be going for, right? I think he is going to be a lot of fun. And I think you saw that they're not going to lose very often because of the guy on the sideline. There might be some things you disagree with. He might be super aggressive, and it might catch him once, but I think more often than not, he's going to win games and maybe steal some games he shouldn't because of that aggressive nature.
You talked about Connor Bazelak, really impressive game. And then we do have a commitment from a pretty good quarterback out of East St. Louis if it holds. But your point about Gary Pinkel always having a quarterback, I think may carry over to Eli as well.
Yeah, and I think you can see that problem is in Lawrence right now, right? Not to take a shot at the Jayhawks, not that anybody on this Zoom would mind if I took a shot at the Jayhawks, but they have not solved the quarterback riddle. They think they've got something going there, but that's been the Achilles heel for Les Miles, who was, again, another talent accumulator, more than he was a strategist, more than he was building an orchestra. When he got it all, when LSU and Ed Orgeron got it all, they had an NFL offensive coordinator basically for 1 year. While he was making his way up, he's now the Carolina offensive coordinator. Their defensive coordinator is now the head coach at Baylor. And then they had a quarterback on the staff that, had been passed over by Ohio State. That was a 1-1 caliber talent. That was the perfect storm. I don't know. I think that perfect storm can happen in other places, but LSU still won with a lot of talent around the great quarterback. If you have the quarterback, you can win a lot of football games, because if you can manage a game and you got a quarterback, then close games should be yours, right? Because it's such an offensive game today, and Mizzou appears to have both of those things in place right now.
Again, I'd like to tell our viewers, if you have a question, type it in, and we'll get to it later in the program. We did have one person say on the end zone, at least it wasn't the north end zone where it's been such a place of catastrophe, but I'm reminded 2 years ago in Kentucky, it was the south end zone that all the bad stuff occurred. Hey, so right when Mizzou gets a lot of momentum, our game this week is postponed against Vanderbilt. We're just going to be looking at this all season, I think, changes in schedule. Do you agree? Or?
Yeah, I have great respect for everybody that's trying to work their way through this, right? Everybody wants football. Fans need football. We want to be as smart as we can about containing the virus and preventing the virus from spreading. And, there's a bigger picture thing. And, I'll go back to something you said about Eli Drinkwitz earlier about how well he did at that Tiger Club and how well he'd done with the team, taking them all down to register to vote. He's been one of the few guys. In fact, Nick Saban is one of the other ones that, when he called out the SEC subtly, so as not to draw a fine about how there's a lack of transparency on what's going on with the COVID testing and who's positive and who's not positive. I thought that was fantastic. And again, shows his confidence and shows, and I think this will work very well in the recruiting, and is probably a part of why they're already recruiting well, is there does seem to be a genuine caring for his fellow human beings, certainly first and foremost, his staff and his players, and looking out for them. And when he calls out the SEC about, the positive tests. I think that's a great move. I think it's a great sign that he has a big picture view. And I don't think, anybody, even Nick Saban, I know he's considered this great successful guy. Well, everyone's just going there because they want to get drafted. That is part of it. And that helps fuel his success. But he is known as the biggest winner when it comes to sitting and talking to mom as anybody's ever been out there. I mean, he clearly sells mom on the fact that if you come to Alabama, you're coming to a family and I'm going to look after your kids. And I think Eli Drinkwitz does that as well. And I think when he does the voting thing, when he's with his team, the things, he knows what's important to those kids and those players and their families. And I think those same things are important to him. I don't think it's an act. I think they're important to him. And I think that's going to serve him really well in the recruiting process as time rolls on.
So the Tigers' next game, we're going to have to look ahead a couple of weeks, will be at Florida. I saw Dan Mullen wants the stadium packed. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
I think that was quickly shut down. So Florida, looked like a top 5 team, but then against A&M, I didn't think A&M was that good early in the year. What did you think of Florida?
I think Dan Mullen is a guy who can win a national championship at Florida. I think he's done great work with his quarterback there. I think he's had great success. Of course, I believe he recruited Dak Prescott. I know he coached Dak Prescott at Mississippi State. And if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I think my timelines are right on that. I think he's a very good coach, and I think there's a lot to like at Florida. They always have talent, and I'm with you. I had Florida very high. I think I had them 4 on my AP ballot to start the year, maybe 5. I know I had them higher than most people, and because I believe in Dan Mullen, I think coaches are a lot of what you can, count on going into a season. But in that game, when Vegas came out and only had him as a 6.5 point favorite, because I'm with you, I haven't seen it yet with Jimbo Fisher. All Jimbo Fisher had done until that game was beat the teams he's supposed to beat. Right. And he had lost to every team he was supposed to lose to. His biggest calling card of success was, a backdoor cover against Clemson last year, where they got a touchdown late to, I think, cover 21.5 or 14.5 or 17.5, something like that. He really hadn't had one of those signature wins. When Vegas had that number that close, it said to me, okay, they think this is going to be more of a fight. And indeed, it was a fight, and one that they got the win. I think you can look at it and say Florida's, licking their wounds. They're going to be hungry. I don't like losing the momentum. I'm with you. And I think there'd be something to be said for going into Florida 2-2, which I think Missouri probably would have been. And you just feel better. You're at 500, a winning record, or within one game, the incentive that if we win this game, we're going to be back at 500. But I don't know. It's the worst thing in the world that Eli Drinkwitz gets an extra week to prepare, right? They get some rest, they get some people healthy, any bumps and bruises hopefully get healed. And you get a guy who's kind of known as, like I said, a mad scientist, gets a chance to maybe cook up some extra things on offense. And maybe this ends up playing out to be the best thing. And we find out that, Drinkwitz on a bye week, we start the trend of Drinkwitz off a bye week. Oh, you don't want to face him. You don't want to face Mizzou after a bye week. It's a tall order, and Florida is significantly better than LSU. LSU, you just can't. Maybe Alabama can, but 15 draft picks, one of which was a 1-1 quarterback, your offensive and defensive coordinators. That's just so hard for anybody to replace. And so this Florida team's much more of a whole team than LSU was, and it'll take a lot to get the win. And if it doesn't go well and it goes bad quickly, I don't think there's any reason for Missouri fans to hang their heads. Right. It's still just part of the process. And going down there is great experience in playing this game, no matter who's in the stands. I think that's aggressive and won't happen to have the stands full, but it'll be great experience for this team moving forward.
You talked about your AP ballot. I wanted to ask you, in this year of so much uncertainty, teams aren't even playing yet. How are you voting it? How do you do it?
It's not easy, right? So we put in a ballot, then teams were dropping out. So we started, I was resubmitting a ballot as teams, as leagues were pulling out, and they said no. They reached out to us and said, we're going to delay it. We want you to do a preseason ballot like everybody was in it. We want to know, this is what it was going to be. And historically, we will reflect what the season was supposed to be with that first poll. And then as teams don't play throughout the course of the season, you take them out of it. So we took out the Big Ten. We had them in there. And the highest was, I had Ohio State preseason number 1. I think Oregon at 7 or 8, Penn State 8-9 range. Michigan and Wisconsin, I think, were in the 13-14 range, 12-13, somewhere in there. And then I think maybe Minnesota tucked in there. I didn't have USC in there, but Minnesota tucked in down in the 20s. And we had to pull all those teams. Boise State, too, had to come out of the Mountain West. So we pulled all those out, and you start, and you're like, holy cow, you realize how fast some of these lower, some of the non-power fives get in there. So that was an exercise, and Louisiana's already in the top 25. They knock off Iowa State. There they are, and all these teams getting up there. And I always rank it 1 through 40 every week. So I know if 22, 24, and 25 lose, I'm not starting from scratch on who are 3 teams that are there. I've got 26 to 40 to see where it is. And I chart games. I have different colors I use for how good their last win was or how bad their loss was. And so you kind of got to feel, well, then 4 weeks in, inject these teams back in. They're going to come back and play. They said they were now eligible. You didn't have to wait till their games were. So I slotted them in about where they were before. And the losses that happened that week made it fairly easy to do that. But I bumped Ohio State down to 3. I didn't think a team deserved to be number 1, having not played a game. And as it's happened, they've kind of sat there. Oregon and Penn State have moved up a spot. But if anybody gets big wins, I'm moving them in front of the teams that aren't playing. So it's going to be really interesting when the teams that have been playing from the get-go stop playing, and then the Big Ten and Pac-10 are playing. How far do you move them? And I think it's going to be a real challenge. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for the people that, and I get the emails. I know there's a number of them that really track each of us and how we vote that are going to get real frustrated, right? Because I think there'll be voters that are pushing Big Ten and Pac-12s up late because they're winning and the other teams are idle. And I just don't think you can do that. So it's a real balancing act. And I like it. I think I don't like the pandemic, right? To quote John Gruden, I hate the virus. But I'm glad that on my watch, I get a chance to vote in what is going to be the singularly most unique top 25 poll there's ever been. I like that it's on my watch, and that whenever my day is over covering sports, I can say, well, yeah, I stood watch on the pandemic year and had to deal with that. I consider it a very entertaining challenge.
So what was your top 4 this week?
Top 4 would have been Clemson 1, Alabama 2, Ohio State. Georgia 3, and I bumped Ohio State down to 4.
Okay. Let's turn to the Chiefs. Again, they lost 13 in a row. They're going to lose sometime. Questions of, on the 4th and 7 play that Patrick threw the interception, the Raiders rushed 3 and forced him to make out of the pocket. Is the offensive line a concern, especially with Osemele out now?
Yeah.
And there's not much depth there, I guess.
No, and the depth was robbed, obviously, coming into the season when LDT opted out, and then Lucas Niang. And I think that's going to be a bigger part of the equation than people realize. I got a couple of friends that are in personnel around the league, and I always go through the Chiefs' whole draft and say, okay, what do you guys have on these guys? It's easy because I'm not asking them to tell me anything off their own players, which they won't do. So it's always a good source. Like, what were you guys thinking about these different guys? And Lucas Niang was a guy that they all said, if he didn't have the hip injury, he's a second half of the first round offensive tackle, and he's athletic. They loved what he brought to the table. And so I think that is a bigger loss. And really, I think that's a bigger loss than LDT, because I think he's got a higher ceiling come second half. If he's playing guard for you, or if they have to move one of the tackles out because of injury, he was going to be able to step in. And so I think the Niang loss is a bigger loss than people realize. Losing a third round offensive lineman, you think of that like, well, what's the big deal? Well, he was a first round talent. And part of it also is the hip condition, I was told, is a degenerative condition, is a chronic condition. There's some people that think he's a one contract guy. And so they didn't want to invest highly in him if he's only going to be in the league for 4 or 5 years. So, but that means for 4 or 5 years, he should play like a first round pick. So I think that hurt them more than people will realize in time. But yes, I think the offensive line is an issue. I think Mitchell Schwartz looks human. He's been beat. We've never seen him really beat consistently on the right side. Eric Fisher's good, but not great. And he looks good to sometimes kind of average. And the interior is getting beat. So I do think that's an issue. Now, I will say Jeff Chadilla was on the Border Patrol this morning, and he said, I think there's some people out there making too much out of the offensive line. I don't see it as bad as they see it, whether that was me or others. I don't know, but that gives me optimism because I think Jeff Chadilla knows what he's talking about. So, and the all 22, I don't think is out yet. So there's some plays you want to go back and look and say, okay, where were the breakdowns? Where there's some issues? But I do think the offensive line is a question, and I think Mahomes can avoid and evade, and he can make plays, but you don't want to make every play like that. I said yesterday, this game, is an example of why people didn't think he was worthy of being the first quarterback, right? Why he was there at number 10, why some people said he was going to be a bust. He lost this game. Would you say that the Chiefs lost because of Patrick Mahomes? No, the statistics aren't pretty. But when you have to run around on every single play, it starts to become an issue. And you can make some plays on the run, but you don't want to have to make every play on the run. You know, he was the best quarterback in the NFL in 2018 from a clean pocket. He was also the best outside the pocket. He was the best quarterback all around. That's great when outside the pocket happens from time to time, but it should not be the design for your quarterback to run. It means a lot of the routes he didn't have a chance to get the ball to because he had to tuck it and get out. Now, he always keeps his eyes downfield when he's looking to make plays, but sometimes, you know, where the play is designed to go is now gone because he had to avoid the rush. So they've got to find a way, whether it's keeping guys home, to protect better. And I'll tell you, on the interception, I think the interception is one of the best positives that Patrick Mahomes has, because, you know, there are guys, and I think Alex Smith was like this. Alex Smith became conditioned over his career to know that if I don't throw interceptions, I can't lose the game for us. And I will stay the starting quarterback and I will make a lot of money. And I'm not saying he was driven by money. He knows that there are big plays that Patrick Mahomes can make that he can't make. He found his niche in the game. Patrick Mahomes can make big time plays. He's secure enough in his position and what he is that when you're fourth down and you're trailing by 9 points, there is no reason to take a sack. There's no advantage to it. Put the ball in the air and try to make a play. Give your receiver a chance to go make a play. And I don't think you ever want to see a quarterback that just is so risk averse that in a situation where you got to have a play, he won't even try to make a play. And I think that's where Alex Smith is. I think that's where Derek Carr has gotten to. You know, guys that if the scheme and everything around them takes them to the lead, you can go to victory. They can guide you. They can manage you to a victory. But the guys that are going to single-handedly pick the team up and carry you to a win are going to make the throw that he made. And that interception is one of the best things. I know you don't like it. It didn't result in a positive, but that's the mindset that you have to have. And I think that was one of the biggest positives to come out of that game.
What about secondary? There were a couple blown coverages that they really took. And I apologize. There's construction outside my window here, so I may get some back. The secondary really looked like it. And getting Breland back, you would think they would have been stronger, but maybe him not being there, they missed some communication.
Missed some communications or just had a bad day. I mean, I think it's definitely, if we had said, you know, coming into the year, and let's keep in mind, the secondary's got a guy on a 1-year deal, Bashaud Breeland. So that tells you that there wasn't a huge market for Bashaud Breeland out there. Charvarius Ward was acquired for an offensive lineman they were going to cut, Parker Anger, a couple of years ago. L'Jarius Sneed was a 4th-round draft pick, right? So every team had a shot at him at least 3 times, and nobody took him. Rashad Fenton was a 6th-round pick in last year's draft. And then Antonio Hamilton was a guy who really couldn't get on the field on defense for the Giants. Those are the 5 corners that they entered the season with. If we'd have said 5 games into it, they're going to play 4 great games and 1 bad one, would you have taken it? Oh, and by the way, whoever plays best is going to consistently get hurt and not be there. They're going to have guys that are going to go into every game with at least 1 guy down, and in every game, someone's going to go down for the first 4 games. Would you have taken that performance? And the answer is yes. I think there's a little bit of recency bias here. Their worst game was their last game. And so right now we think the sky is falling. I do think that they were exposed. I think they overperformed the first 4 games. So there is work to be done there. There are things that they're going to have to do to be able to play well. But I also think just in general, this was a trap game coming off a huge game with the Patriots, an unplanned for shortened week, all kinds of schedule changes, which I know you say, well, you got to just focus on the Raiders. Well, that sounds good in principle, but it's easier said than done. And then a huge look ahead game on the other side with the Buffalo Bills against a team that you're 12-2 against over the last 7 years, have won 5 in a row against, and everybody's telling you is not that good. They're coming off 2 consecutive losses. This was just a classic trap game. And maybe the coaches were overconfident. Maybe the players were overconfident. I thought the heat got to them. I don't know how conditioned they were for it. Maybe practicing in Vegas gave the Raiders an edge coming into this game. But I think this was a perfect storm of a lot of things going wrong, and the Chiefs were still within 1 score at the end. That's why I don't think that, go and lay an egg and get beat 31-10 by the Buffalo Bills. And now it's time to say, okay, do the Chiefs have problems? Is the defense that bad, giving up 40 and 31 back-to-back? The offense, not scoring more than 10 points. Okay, we'll say that there's a real problem if they lay an egg against the Buffalo Bills. Personally, I think they bounce back and have a good performance. Same way a lot of people thought there were problems after the Charger game, and they played their best game of the year against the Ravens the next week. I think I lost your volume. I don't know.
Mark,
So
you're muted. There you go.
I'm sorry. I'm fighting construction outside the window here. So anyway, Soren, we're going to get to our questions in just a second, but I want to ask you about the Royals real quickly. What do we take from this season? Now, going into the season, everybody was talking about the pitching from 2019, but one stat that stood out to me in 2019, the Royals were 14 out of 15 in runs scored. And the real problem to me seems to be the offense. There's lots of pitching in the system. What do we take from this season? It's aberration of a season of 60 games.
I don't take anything from the win-loss record, 26-34. They did beat the over-under. So to quote Eli Drinkwitz, when asked, what do you want from the season? He said, well, I think 3.5 wins is what they're giving us. So we want to have more than that, at least 4. I thought that was impressive that he would say, put it out there. We want to win at least 4 games. Most coaches, we're just looking for improvement. And if we can get better in certain spots, and he put it out there, hey, we want to win more than they say we can. And so from that standpoint, I think it's a positive, but the Royals finished strong each of the last 2 years en route to losing 100 games. So there's very little to take from their record. But the one thing I will say this is, we've been hearing about the pitching, and they had 5 guys in the top 100 prospects that were pitchers back leading up to their World Series run. And it was Danny Duffy, it was Chris Dwyer, it was John Lamb, it was Mike Montgomery, and I'm missing one in there. And we said at that time, listen, if you get one top of the rotation guy, one bottom of the rotation guy, and one good reliever out of that mix, you've beat the odds. Well, here the Royals come back and everybody's talking about their big 4 from the draft class a couple of years ago. And generally, that's what you would assign to it. One top of the rotation guy, one bottom guy, and if you get a reliever out of it, you've beaten the odds. And here with less than 150 innings of minor league experience, Brady Singer's flirting with a no-hitter and finishing as strong as he did. Chris Bubich is proven to be a guy that can eat innings, kind of a left-handed Jeff Suppan looking type guy. And by the way, I know Suppan got a bad rap here, but he went on to win a championship and go to playoffs before. I think he and Mike Sweeney were the best guys, pitching and hitting, and everyone decided it was their fault when in reality it was everything but their fault, right? But to see those guys come along, and then to hear a guy like Keith Law, who says the best one of the bunch is still down in the minor leagues, right? So that there's even better coming. And they've got some other guys that really weren't in that big 4 that are considered good pitching prospects. Pitching is a currency in baseball is what Dayton Moore said a while ago. And they've proven that they can rebuild a bullpen because the bullpen was outstanding, that they can find those arms in different places. And they're now for the first time proving that they can develop young starting pitching. And so those guys weren't supposed to be up as fast as they were, yet they held their own. I think that is a tremendous sign, but you're right. Their biggest problem is the lineup. And the question is, how fast can they fill that lineup? It's really the bottom of the order. I mean, they've got guys. Mondesi has to find some consistency. You are what the back of your baseball card says you are once you've had as much time in the big leagues as he's had. Now, maybe he's going to turn the corner. I hope so. The Royals only have 3 more years of control. So you'd like to get some actual production and not just potential out of the guy, especially now that he's going to be making millions of dollars for the team. But they've got to find a way to finish out that lineup. There doesn't appear to be anybody. Maybe Khalil Lee, who was in the alternative camp, would be a guy who could be part of the equation next year, but they're going to have to find those position players. And the real question is, how soon is this ownership group going to be willing to spend the money? Because they're either going to have to trade pitching for hitting, or they're going to have to go buy it on the free agent market. And generally speaking, when you hand out $1 billion, writing a bunch of checks to players is not your first choice. Throw in losing all the revenue that they lost by not having anybody in the stands and all the games that weren't played. I just can't see the payroll going up a lot. Ian Kennedy comes off the books, and I know a lot of people will be saying, well, they got that money to spend. I don't think so. I think it's going to be very lean. And if they make any moves for offense, it's probably going to be guys via the trade or cost effective. And, Michael Franco turned out pretty good, and if they can find another one of those, that goes to helping fix the lineup. But the lineup's just way too thin, just 1 through 9. But even then, just giving a guy a day off, you get a guy who doesn't even belong in the big leagues. Not forget about starting. He shouldn't even be backing people up. And until that lineup gets better, I think you're shooting for 500 still.
Let's get to some questions. First of all, fans seem to like the SEC playing only conference opponents. You see adding another conference game to the schedule in the future and removing one of the Patsy games?
It'd be great. I know it would make everybody in every other league happy. Big 12 fans consider it a competitive disadvantage. that they don't have to play that extra game. I know they complain about it. I hear it from them all the time that the SEC, by, getting that scheduled win in there, they're like, well, what's one more game? Well, half your teams lose. It's 7 more losses added to the league, as opposed to maybe 1 loss, right, out of that extra game. So I think, why wouldn't you? Particularly, it's the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Floridas now, and that feel like they're in the hunt for the national championship, that want to do everything they can to make it as easy a road to get there. What I'm hoping is that the other, 9 to 11 schools recognize that it's a much better Saturday for your fans to come out and watch a real game. It's a much better time getting together when you see these games. I think it's great. I think, it's something that, whether they break away or it's the NCAA, that there should be mandatory to get every league up to at least 9, if not 10 conference games, because it just makes for better television. And I think at some point the TV partners, and that may be what comes out of this, the TV partners say, hey, this is where the ratings are, playing real games. So let's get some more real games on the schedule. I love it, but I think, you certainly want all the leagues to have to do it, so you're not at a competitive disadvantage in trying to win a spot in the college football playoffs.
Next question. How much fun was it in the first several months of the pandemic to do a daily sports talk show with no sports other than Korean baseball? And I know you've been doing your shows from home during the pandemic.
Yeah. The DC Dinos were my Korean team I adopted when we were all picking teams for where we were going to go to have something to watch. I'll never forget. And I told this story. I think I was on I can't remember if it was a podcast or a show. Sitting at home, I just broadcast down at the Big 12 tournament on the Wednesday, the bottom end of the tournament Wednesday. And I think it announced no fans. They were going to keep the Big 12 tournament going, no fans. And I'm sitting watching, I think it was an NBA game or maybe it was a different game, whatever I was watching. And they came across that the NBA was shutting down. And, I said, oh, wow. And my oldest daughter is sitting next to me. And she said, well, what's the problem, Dad? I said, well, they shut the NBA down. She goes, is that bad? I said, well, if they're shutting down, the other sports are probably not far behind. And what I do is talk about sports. And if they're not playing sports, this is going to be a tough go. And my wife walked by and said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, they shut the NBA down. She's like, oh, okay. And my daughter goes, Mom, it's what Dad does. What are we going to do? And so there was this moment of like, holy cow. And so it was scary, man. I'm not going to lie to you. And there have been, like everybody, we've had, cuts that have gone on in the building and things that have had to happen, but fortunately the company is, most everybody is still with the company, and we found a way. And so what we did was we dug in and we thought, boy, greatest coaches of all time, top 10 running backs, like bunch of list stuff, right? What you see on NFL Network when it's out of season. Like we're going to have to start digging into different things, kind of what we'd call evergreen topics, more generic topics and a lot of different things. So we actually sat and brainstormed about all these different things, that different ways we could do things to try to fill the time. And as we got into it, we had all this stuff ready to go. And every day there seemed to be news, and the NFL helped a lot. Listen, it would have been very different had we caught the NFL in season and the NFL was shut down with nothing going on, because there were no baseball trades. There were no roster adjustments. There was nothing to be done. There were no coaching, managing hires or firings. The NFL went on as business as usual, and being the most popular sport, there's no doubt that was a tremendous advantage for us, that we always had that. But even in the other sports, there was news and there was information. And I'll say whenever my career is done, that the 6 months or the 5 months that we didn't have games will probably be the proudest work that the work I'm the most proud of in my career, because we found a way to generate what I think are real sports topics. We didn't start breaking down, music of the day or movies that were out there or streaming shows. We did sports talk, which is what I think our audience expects from our show. And we did it every day. And I can honestly tell you, there was one segment the entire time where I felt like I had nothing to talk about and I was just filling. And we were just trying to get to the commercial break. And that'll be the proudest moment for me, is that we filled 4 hours every day with sports talk radio. So it was scary. I mean, there's no way around it. But as we dug in and got into it, and we got a couple of months through it, we found a rhythm of how you do sports talk without sports. I don't want to do it again, right? But it can be done. And I'll say that for the entire industry, right? Because sports talk radio didn't just fold the tents and go home anywhere. Everybody found a way, whatever it was, to get through that time. And I think it says something for the industry. A lot of times we've earned a lot of people in my industry have earned a bad reputation for just being, negative about everything or trying to start crap or whatever. Well, there wasn't even any crap to start. And the industry found a way to make it through, as did every other industry, which should take great pride in making it through very difficult times. But it was scary at first, but we found our stride, maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks in.
Next question. Do you think our first round draft pick, Clyde EdwardsHelaire, is living up to his potential?
No, not yet, but that's not to say that he's failing his potential either. I mean, I think the Andy Reid offense is a complex one. I know Kareem Hunt came in, and that's going to be the bar he's measured by, and rightfully so. Kareem Hunt went in the third. They went even higher to get this kid. I think there were different circumstances that led them to this decision. I think he's capable of more, and I think we will see more. One of the things I mentioned, the scouts that I've talked to, one of the scouts I talked to said they had him graded just below Christian McCaffrey as far as like when they looked at what McCaffrey's grade was versus what the grade was for Clyde EdwardsHelaire, that his ability to catch the ball. And we haven't really seen that. And so I'm wondering, I talked to Willie Gay Jr., who we didn't see at all, right, on defense to start, and is now getting in more and more and more. I talked to him and I said, what are they doing? And, it's like kind of they got a package and you learn that package really well. Okay, that's good. Now we're going to add another package and another package. And that's the foundation for now. Okay, in blitz situations or different things, just keep adding on what he's doing. And I think for EdwardsHelaire, who's a very bright guy and gets football schemes, I think there's still a growth curve to it. And I think maybe Andy Reid's been guilty of not getting to it. I think he's fallen in love, and maybe Patrick Mahomes is guilty of it as well. They've fallen in love with their ability to get the ball down the field and get the ball to receivers, which you definitely want to do. But I think getting Clyde EdwardsHelaire open in space is something that they could do more. And as long as teams are going to play them with that Seattle, cover 2, cover 3, take the top away type of defense and make you do things underneath, I think you'll see them start to do more of maybe what we'll see eventually is, flexing him out to a wide receiver spot, the way Alvin Kamara is used by the Saints, the way Marshall Faulk was used by the Rams. I think he's got that kind of ability, particularly if you've got a team where you can get him isolated on a linebacker, because if he puts a move on somebody in the open field, there's no way that they can stay with him. And he'll turn the corner and be open for some slants and some quick hitters, not just screenplays, but real routes. And I think that's coming down the road. So, no, I don't think he's lived up to his potential. I think there's more there, and I think they will get to that eventually.
What do you expect from Mizzou basketball this year?
I expect them to be better. Look, they've got a lot of pieces that I think have potential. I think the question is, can they bring it all together and be more as a whole? I always liken it to like a Porsche. A Porsche is an expensive car, but it's worth even more chopped up and sold as stolen parts, right? So, that's not what you want to be. You want to be the car that the parts aren't worth much, but the car is really valuable when you put it all together. And I think that's the task that's here. Is again, I go back to what Coach Donlin said about are you accumulating talent or are you building an orchestra? And I think that's one of the things. Look, the talent acquisition is supposed to be one of the strengths. And if you can't get good enough talent, it's going to be really difficult to compete in the SEC, which has become very proficient, not just Kentucky, but very proficient at keeping Southeastern talent home. And I think you've got to have the talent to play, right? So you can't just be devoid of talent, but it's all got to fit together. And I don't know that it all really fit together. And I think that chemistry's got to start showing itself here moving forward. I think everybody on the Zoom knows about the contract of Konzo Martin and how that all works. So he's got some time to make it happen. But I think you want to start seeing some of that chemistry come together.
Then quick question. When is Will Harris on again? We got a viewer who really enjoys listening to it.
Yeah, that's probably soon, because I know he's probably Jed's favorite guest. And he's probably Jed's favorite guy to talk to off the air. So I would think it's been 2 or 3 weeks since we've talked to Will Harris. I would think he would probably be on either later this week or next week for sure. Will is just one of the best. And I'll be honest with you, he truly is. Like, we run the Open where it's like very little is known of the man. Google him and try to find a picture. You'll find one. It's the little image that goes next to his face at ESPN. And he's moved several times since we've had him on. He is, I believe, I believe, I don't know for sure, but truly a professional gambler is actually his how he makes his money. But he's one of the wittiest, most entertaining guys, always extremely opinionated. Not that he's 100% right on his opinions. He'll make mistakes here and there, but witty, funny, strong opinions stated with humor. He's about as good a guest as you could want. I will say this: you better be prepared when you bring him on, because he's not one of the guys that's just going to do the job for you. Like, to talk about Tennessee. Like, I always hate to talk about. That's one of my pet peeves. And every now and then it slips out from me, and I hate it. Like, to me, it's just lazy interviewing when you say, well, talk about the Chiefs. Well, what? What do you want to? I mean, there's a million. You want me to just do your show for you? Like, here, I'll ramble for 5 minutes about the Chiefs. So you got to come with questions, and if you come with questions, he's got answers. And so yes, that's great feedback, and I'm glad people like him because I think he's awesome.
And when is he on with you? What day?
We don't have a set day because, I tried to actually get him locked into a weekly spot to see if we could make it worth his while, pay him a little bit. We don't pay much, but, if you're going to take your time out of your week to come on, we try to get you something to make it worth your while. And so I wanted to get him weekly. And he said, well, he couldn't commit to that because of all the work he does on college football. I think the guy literally listens to every conference. Like Eli Drinkwitz does a Zoom, he hears it. He checks it out. They all the conference calls, he's on all those. He is constantly, whether it's getting the transcripts, whether it's actually hearing them live or a recording of them, he listens to like every coaches and players breakdown there is. And because he'll quote like, well, Todd Lebo asked the question on the SEC conference call about, and because he's there, he's listening. And so he wouldn't commit to weekly. He wouldn't commit to biweekly. He said, just call me when you think you got something you want to talk about, and I'll try to make it work. So, sometimes we call him and he says, not this week. But when it's been 2 or 3 weeks, we put the call in, and as soon as we can get him on, we put him on.
Okay. One last question. I feel like I can talk to you all day, but we need to be respectful of your time. What, if any, changes necessitated this year in sports will end up being adopted going forward after the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great one.
Or rule changes like in baseball.
Yeah, that's a great one because in baseball may be the one that we get the most from. Maybe because baseball was also the most open to change before the pandemic started. I think they had a lot of things that they were kind of moving towards. I said, going into this, like whatever you've thought about doing, right? Like the SEC is a great example. 10 conference games. Maybe you don't want to play 10, but you want to play 9. You're going to get a feel for what it is to play all those games, and you're going to get feedback from your fans, right? The feedback we got here today is that fans like it. SEC against SEC games are big games, and people like big games. They tried something, whatever it was you could try out during this time period. And maybe we'll end up finding out that a neutral site World Series makes for better baseball if you don't have the travel in between. Maybe it'll be a neutral site NBA Finals will be something they'll come away with. Whatever it is, try everything you've ever wanted to try because it's a complete mulligan. Nothing will be held against you because it was a virtually impossible scenario that you had to deal with. And so I do like that at least there was some of that happened. I can see the 7-inning doubleheader being a regular occurrence. I think they are headed to man on second for extra innings. I think that will stick. I think they liked, they got confirmation of what they wanted to do with the relievers to cut down the number of pitching changes. I think we'll see a lot of those things stick with baseball. And soon behind it, I think, is robot umpires, right? Still a guy behind the plate to facilitate the game and to make the calls at the plate. But I think you can see, tennis has had it for a long time where they can tell whether the ball is in or out. They know with the camera technology that's out there, if a ball passed through the strike zone, and it would require an adjustment, but I think it's an adjustment that everybody would make quickly. So I think those are probably the biggest scenarios. I'd be intrigued if football gets away from contact. We've gotten a more offensive game. Do they get away from some of the OTAs and mini camps? Do they go to just, more maybe virtual sessions? Is that where it goes? Do they get even further away from any contact in practice to protect their players? Because what we found is we have a very offensive game this year. Now, I think the refs are helping with that. The number of holding penalties that are being called is way down, and I don't think that's because the linemen are more proficient after not practicing nearly as much. I think there's a league, listen, we don't want to be watching holding. We want offense, and they're getting offense. So I think there are some principles that happened in the NFL this year that may be adopted, that they get away from as much on the field training as maybe they did in the past, that they're finding out that the schemes are more important than maybe the repetitions that are out there. Basketball, the NBA, I don't, they're not obviously going to go to a bubble. So I don't know that basketball really changed much, but I will say this. They did find that whether it was the lack of travel or the lack of being on the road, the shooting was much better, which early on made for a lot better, more competitive and better shooting games, more offensive games in basketball. So they definitely don't want to lose that ticket revenue. So unless they think that they could get a Super Bowl type, or a diet Super Bowl type price for their tickets, would they ever go to a neutral field? And I don't know that they can in that, but they did find out that the offense got better from that standpoint as well. And I think you may see what the NBA, they didn't do this, but what you may see is, particularly in the West, if you're a Western Conference team, and I forget what they play, 4 games against each other or 3 or whatever it is, but you may start seeing some, at least 2 game sets come in and play back to back and cut down on the travel instead of 1 game and back on the plane. Start trying to do more of a baseball style, arrive, play all your games, head to the next town, only 1 trip to LA if you're the Denver Nuggets instead of 2 or 3. Put the Lakers and Clippers back to back the way the Pac-12 does, where everybody from Arizona goes up and plays the 2 Washington schools on the same weekend, and the Washington schools do the same thing coming down to Oregon. I think you might see them try to do that because I think less travel, less arriving at 4 a.m. and turning around and playing at 7 o'clock that next night makes for a better product. And I think everybody will investigate what were the things that happened here. And I could see the MLS. I think the tournament was a success. And I think the MLS tournament and the bubble success is the reason why you're going to get NBA tournaments. They talked about kind of maybe going to their own, Champions League for anybody who follows, the EPL, going to that kind of thing. And I think you're going to see a tournament, a non-regular season tournament in season, either beginning of the season, mid-season. And I think you may see college basketball steal that, a conference tournament at the beginning like we used to have, or mid-season like we used to have back in the day. Some other kind of field, multiple league tournament. I think those things are now in play. There were a lot of things that I think ended up being more successful than people realized. And I think you'll see change come quicker now that they were forced to change and they realize that they can do it. I think they'll be empowered and more bold about making any kind of changes that they think are good for the league, good for the fans, and good for the bottom line.
Soren, run out of time. To quote you, great stuff as always. Really appreciate it. I always appreciate how much homework you do, and you really research your topics before you come on the air. So you do.
Well, thank you. That's certainly what we strive for. So that means a lot. I really appreciate it. And I'll tell you what, I think it's a great time for the Tigers. I know how important football is, basketball too, but I think it's great. I really do want I think Eli Drinkwitz, you guys got a winner, and it's going to be a great time to be a Mizzou fan. And so it's long overdue, and the fan base has always been better than the performance, I think, a lot of times. And I think that fan base hopefully is going to get rewarded here real soon.
All right. Thanks very much. He's the host of the program 2 to 6 on 810 every day, Monday through Friday. Make sure you tune him in. He's the best around. Hey, folks, next week we will have former Colorado head coach and current college football analyst Gary Barnett. He'll be zooming in from Colorado. He's always been a great favorite among the club when he's coming in person. We'll have him on Zoom next week. Don't forget for membership information, kctigerclub.com, and you can watch a replay of this on YouTube later in the weeks. Please spread the word among your friends to join the club. Go to kctigerclub.com. Next home game for the Tigers will be against Kentucky, and that will be the last weekend in October 30th, I believe the date. So don't forget, or maybe the 31st, I'm sorry. Anyway, if you're interested in parking passes for that, please send an email to president@KC Tiger Club. Thanks for joining us today. Gary Barnett at noon on Tuesday, October 20th. Everybody have a great week. And Soren, thanks again.